All right, a lot of comments on the last couple of videos I did talking about point spreads on some of the bigger games in college football. A lot of the comments wanting me to do certain Pac-12 teams. So I've decided what to do in this video is to just sort of run through some of the bigger games within the Pac-12. So we're going to talk a lot in this video about Southern Cal, Washington, Oregon, Washington State, Oregon State, Utah, UCLA. So if you're curious or interested in the Pac-12 at all, or what some of my thoughts are on certain teams in the Pac-12, this is the video for you. Before we get any specific games, my overall thoughts on the Pac-12. I've had this debate with a few people over the last several months since the season ended. I think you can make the argument that the Pac-12 might have been the third best conference in college football last year behind the SEC and the Big Ten. I think they finished the season with 6 teams ranked. The Pac-12 is still suffering from a reputational standpoint by not making the playoff in forever. They haven't made the playoff since, I believe, 2015. And Oregon made it in, I think, 2014. Washington made it in 2015. No Pac-12 team has made it since. I also think the Pac-12 reputationally has suffered over the last few years because their sort of flagship football institution, Southern Cal, has been down for the majority of those years. Now, they're trending up now under Lincoln Riley. But a lot of people have quit paying attention to the Pac-12. I spent a large portion of last season trying to get people to watch the Pac-12 because it was great football week in and week out. And you had some legitimately good teams. Turns out maybe there wasn't any one great team to come out of the Pac-12 last year. And who knows, that may be the case again this year. But you got 5 or 6 teams in the Pac-12 this year that are really, really good. I would not be at all surprised to see 5 or 6 teams finish the season ranked inside the top 25 from the Pac-12 yet. Again, the question this season when it comes to the Pac-12 is, will one of those teams be able to break through? Will one of those teams be able to win the Pac-12 with just the one loss? Or maybe undefeated, right? Southern Cal had a chance last year. Heading into the Pac-12 championship game against Utah, they had just one loss. But they then lost that Pac-12 championship game, giving them their second loss and knocking themselves out of a potential playoff berth. Can one of these teams run the table this year and win the Pac-12 with no losses or one loss and get into the playoffs? We'll see. I think there's a couple of teams that have a legitimate shot to do that. Probably 3 in my mind that have a legitimate shot at making the playoffs this year. But again, I think there's 5 or 6 good teams in the Pac-12. All right. So DraftKings is what I've been using. They released the lines on a bunch of key games for the 23 season about a week ago, a little over a week ago now, I guess. So I've been going through some of these games, giving you the current point spreads and kind of telling you a little bit about what I think about them. Florida and Utah, this is not a Pac-12 game, but a Pac-12 team in Utah. Utah's favored by 10 over Florida. I think that's probably about right. Florida beat Utah last year, which is kind of sad for Utah. Utah's sort of in the middle of their best run in school history right now and lost to a pretty bad Florida team last year. That game was in Gainesville. This one's at Utah. Utah's a 10-point favorite. Most people expect Utah to win, but most people expected Utah to win last year, so we'll see. If I had to pick a winner in that game right now, I'd pick Utah. I don't know about the 10 points, though. Colorado and TCU. I think we talked about this game a little bit already when I did the Colorado video. Colorado's a 21.5-point underdog. To TCU, they're not going to be very good. Colorado, I'm not going to beat that dead horse anymore. Let's scroll down and see what else we got. Here's an interesting non-con game. Washington on the road at Michigan State. I don't expect much from Michigan State last year. Their starting quarterback just transferred out to Auburn. They were horrible last year. Michigan State was after a really good year in 21 where they made a New Year's Six game behind the legs and the running of Kenneth Walker. He wasn't there last year and it showed. They were absolutely horrendous. They continue to be one of the worst pass defenses in the country year in and year out, and that is not good going up against Washington here early in the year. And Washington is just a much better team than Michigan State. I'm a Mel Tucker fan. He spent some time at Georgia under Kirby Smart. Right now, it's not looking good for Sparty and Mel Tucker. Washington's a 10-point favorite. I would take Washington and lay the 10 points in that one. I don't think Michigan State's going to be very good. Continuing on here until we come across some more games featuring the Pac-12. How about UCLA and Utah? Utah's an 8-point favorite. This is an interesting game to me because Utah loses some key pieces. They get a lot of key pieces back. Of course, quarterback Cam Rising. Now, he hasn't been able to practice at all since last season ended. He blew his knee out in the last game of the year, and he's still recovering. So he didn't do anything in spring. He's not doing anything right now in terms of off-season conditioning. I mean, he's doing rehab work on his knee. And the time frame for his return is right around week 1 of the season. So it's not even a guarantee that he will be available for that Florida game, which is going to be a huge loss to Utah, I think. Any game they have to play without Cam Rising, I think, is bad news for Utah. But here they are at 8-point home favorite against UCLA. Utah and UCLA are similar teams to me within the Pac-12, so I'm a little bit surprised that this is an 8-point spread. Now, unlike Utah, UCLA is replacing their quarterback, so maybe that has something to do with it. But UCLA had the best year they've had under Chip Kelly last year. They've recruited pretty well. It seems like maybe Chip Kelly's finally got his legs back up underneath him after stepping away from college football for a while after a pretty good run at Oregon. I'm a little surprised this line is 8 points, to be honest. If I was going to bet this game right now, I'd probably take UCLA in the points. I think Utah can definitely win. It's a home game for Utah, but I don't know about 8 points. That seems like a lot to me for that particular game. Let's see what else they have on here involving the Pac-12. Here's a good one. Saturday, October 14th. So about halfway through the season, Oregon on the road at Washington. Who you play in the Pac-12 this year is going to go a long way to determining what the Pac-12 looks like at the end of the year. You know, they've done away with divisions now. There is no North and South divisions in the Pac-12. So what they do is they just take the two teams at the end of the season with the best conference record. They pit them against each other in the conference title game. And because you've got more than 8 teams, you know, you've got, what do you have, 12 teams in the Pac-12? You can't play them all. So, you know, some teams have to play Oregon, Washington, and Southern Cal. Some teams only play 2 of those 3. Some teams only play 1, whatever. You get it. Who you play and where you play them in the Pac-12 can have a big impact on how you finish up the season. DraftKings in Vegas expect this to be a pretty good game. I do too. I think these are two of the best 3 teams in the Pac-12. I think Southern Cal, Oregon, and Washington are the best 3 teams in the Pac-12 this year. Those are the 3 teams I think have a shot to make the playoff this year. Is Southern Cal, Oregon, and Washington. This game's in Washington, so a road game for Oregon, and Washington is favored by 1.5. Bo Nix comes back at Auburn. Washington's got, is it Michael Penix? Anyway, these are 2 high-powered offenses here. Washington's got a pretty good defense. Dan Lanning, of course, head coach at Oregon, is a defensive guy. This will be a hell of a game. I'm excited for this one. Saturday, October 14th, Oregon at Washington. Washington favored by 1.5. Southern Cal at Notre Dame, not a Pac-12 matchup, but a Pac-12 team in Southern Cal. They play Notre Dame every single year. Has this game been moved? Is it just me? Isn't this game normally played much later in the season? They say this game's on October 14th. Southern Cal on the road at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is actually favored in this game by 1. I don't really understand this. I think Southern Cal right now is in a better position than Notre Dame is. I think they have a huge coaching advantage with Lincoln Riley. Now, defensively, you know, Southern Cal is a train wreck and a disaster. And I think Sam Hartman has had a big impact on this line here. Sam Hartman can light you up. Sam Hartman can light up good defenses. Sam Hartman threw 6 touchdown passes. 6 against Clemson last year. And Clemson wasn't very good last year. They won 10 games. They had one of the best defenses in the country last year. Their offense was the problem. Clemson's defense was the real deal. Sam Hartman lit them up like a Christmas tree. 6 touchdown passes. That's the type of performance it would take from Sam Hartman, I think, if Notre Dame's going to beat Southern Cal, and he's capable of doing it. So Caleb Williams comes back at Southern Cal. They bring in Marshawn Lloyd at running back from South Carolina. They bring in Bear Alexander to shore up that defensive line to go alongside Corey Foreman, the number 1 recruit in the country a year ago. Southern Cal is getting better talent-wise defensively. I still have plenty of questions about Alex Grinch when it comes to philosophy and scheme. I've never seen an Alex Grinch defense under Lincoln Riley that even looks remotely competent, going back to the days at Oklahoma. So, again, my thoughts on Southern Cal are very well known. I think they're a really good team. I think they're going to be a perennial playoff contender as long as Lincoln Riley's the head coach. I think they're going to have one of the best offenses in the country as long as Lincoln Riley's the head coach. I think they're going to have a Heisman contending QB as long as Lincoln Riley's the head coach. But until I see them win a playoff game, I will not be picking Southern Cal to win a playoff game. They've had plenty of opportunities, Lincoln Riley has, and he's over. The defense has been atrocious. It's not that the defense has just been not quite good enough. The defense has just been absolutely horrid under Lincoln Riley, whether you're talking Oklahoma or Southern Cal. Maybe it's getting better. We'll see this year. They're a 1-point underdog on the road at Notre Dame. That line might be a little bit surprising to some people. What else do we have here within the Pac-12? Let's take a look. Utah at Southern Cal. Southern Cal's a 7-point favorite in that one. I think that's about right. I have mentioned this a couple of times when it comes to Utah. I don't think Utah's getting any worse. Utah's made the Pac-12 title game 2 years in a row. I mean, it's just unbelievable what Utah's been able to do out there in the Pac-12 the last few years. It's not that I think Utah's getting worse. I think Utah was in prime position to take advantage of a period of time where the Pac-12 overall was down. Southern Cal was down. Oregon had a couple of bad years. Washington disappeared for a while. UCLA in the transition to Chip Kelly was a kind of a nothing team for a couple of years. And Utah was just steady along the way and really, by default, became the best team in the Pac-12. I don't think that this Utah has suddenly gotten worse. I think those other teams, though, have gotten a lot better. And I think the potential for those teams overall is greater than it is for Utah. Places like Southern Cal, Oregon, and Washington are going to be able to recruit better, generally speaking, than a place like Utah is. So if they get good coaches there, and I think they've got good coaches there now at all three places, not good news for Utah in the long run. I'm not at all surprised that Southern Cal is a 7-point home favorite in that one. Revenge game for Southern Cal. They lost to Utah not once but twice last year. Would not be surprised to see Southern Cal run away with that one at home. All right, let's keep it moving. Looking for some more Pac-12 games. Oregon at Utah. Utah's a 1.5-point favorite. I'm telling you, it's going to be a cluster at the top of that Pac-12 between Southern Cal, Oregon, Washington, and then maybe just below that, your Utahs, your UCLAs. Oregon State is another team to keep an eye on. Washington State is not bad. Cal, Stanford, and the two Arizona schools kind of floating in the wind. But man, there are some good teams, and equally good. Hard to differentiate between a lot of these teams. I've talked a lot about that when I did my top 25 video, and I've got Washington and Oregon clustered together here. Southern Cal just a couple of spots ahead of them. Utah just a couple of spots behind them. I've got Oregon State somewhere. Where's Oregon State? Are they down here? They're up here somewhere. The Beavers? Where are you hiding at, Oregon State? I'm probably looking right at it and not seeing it. I know I'm looking right at it and not seeing it. Where the hell is Oregon State? Now I'm about to get mad now. I'm about to get big, man. I'm about to get so goddamn mad. Oregon State up there. Oregon State up there. The Beavers. There you go. Anyway, so a lot of really good teams in the Pac-12. Boy, that was a giant waste of time. Oregon at Utah. Utah's favored by 1.5. If I had to pick that game right now, I'd pick Oregon. I think Washington, Oregon, and Southern Cal are a rung above the other good teams in the Pac-12. So gut feeling right now, 3 months away from the season starting, my gut feeling is that Southern Cal would beat Utah, Oregon State, UCLA, Washington State, and so would Oregon, and so would Washington. That's just kind of, I feel like there's almost two tiers of good teams in the Pac-12. The first tier being Southern Cal, Washington, Oregon, and then a tier below that, which is still good teams, Oregon State, Washington State, Utah, UCLA. We'll see how that pans out once the season starts, but that's kind of my feeling heading into the season. Washington at Southern Cal. Southern Cal's a 7-point home favorite. This one surprises me a little. I thought this one would be a little closer. I get that it's a home game for Southern Cal. I don't know that either team should be favored by 7 points in this one, though, to be honest with you. I feel like either one of these teams is capable of beating the other. I really do. Southern Cal is obviously the bigger brand of the two here, and so maybe that's reflected a little bit in the line. They kind of know the general public will lean more towards Southern Cal, so they can juice the line up a little and get away with it. I'm not sure, but I'm going to be honest. If I was taking this game right now, again, not that I don't think Southern Cal can win the game, but 7 points, I would take Washington in the 7 points and hope for a close game in that one. Southern Cal and Oregon, this one's a little bit more along the lines of where I think it should be. Oregon is a 2-point home favorite. Not a lot of massive home field advantages in terms of crowds and things like that in the Pac-12, but Oregon is at or near the top of that list. Tough place to play on the road in Oregon. I actually like Oregon at home. If I had to pick the game right now, which I don't, I'll make picks later, but if I was picking right now, my gut would tell me to go with Oregon just because they're the home team. Right now, they're favored by 2 points in that one. Utah and Washington. Washington favored by 3.5. You see how small a lot of these lines are in these Pac-12 matchups? I mean, even the one that I disagreed with, was it Washington at Southern Cal? Yeah, Washington at Southern Cal, 7 points. 7 points is not a big spread in college football. In the NFL, yes, your average spread on a game in the NFL is 3 or 4 points. In college, that's not the case. You see a lot of double-digit spreads in college football. Every single week, you can find a bunch of spreads in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Single-digit spreads are hard to come by in college football. But you see a ton of games in the Pac-12 this year where the spread is between 1.5 and 5, 6, 7 points. It's very hard to differentiate between the top 5 and 6 teams this season in the Pac-12 because they're all legitimately good. And we just don't really know which one is going to be the best of those 5 or 6, right? So you're seeing a lot of close lines in these Pac-12 games, especially this far out with no games having been played. UCLA on the road at Southern Cal and USC is a 12-point favorite. By on the road, I mean across the street or whatever it is. These two schools in the same town here. But Southern Cal is a 12-point favorite. They got a quarterback coming back. UCLA doesn't. This line might be a little bit too out of whack, but not much. I mean, I think Southern Cal probably wins this game by a couple of scores at least. I don't know. Maybe you can convince me that it should be closer to 10 points maybe, but I actually don't mind it here at 12. Southern Cal, a 12-point home favorite over in-city rivalry rival UCLA. Oregon State at Oregon. Oregon's an 8.5-point home favorite. Oregon benefiting from some home games here. Just going through, looking at these lines and noticing that Oregon is the home team in a couple of key games this year. They lost to Oregon State last year, so revenge for Oregon. 8.5-point home favorite against in-state rival Oregon State. What do they call that game? The Civil War, I think. And they call that game the Civil War. That might be it for the Pac-12. That's it. That's it for what they have listed for the Pac-12. So there you go. Some thoughts of mine, generally speaking, on the Pac-12 and specifically about, the top 4, 5, 6 teams out there, which again, I think are Southern Cal, Oregon, and Washington, kind of the best 3. And then I think you got a tier under that, which is also pretty good, including Utah, UCLA, Oregon State, and Washington State. All right, let me know down below what else you need to hear about. Have a great day.